The sound of tearing silk screamed louder than the idling jet engines. It ripped through the narrow jet bridge like an animal being skinned alive. Vivian Toussaint felt the fabric of her charcoal cashmere hoodie give way under a fist that did not care what it cost. Her body lurched forward. The metal ridges of the jet bridge floor scraped against her knees through thin cotton joggers. Cold air rushed in from the open aircraft door behind her, carrying the sharp sting of jet fuel and rain. She did not scream at first. Her glasses slipped down her nose. Then a hand clamped around her wrist. "Stop resisting." The words were automatic. Bored. Procedural. She wasn't resisting. Officer Kowski's grip tightened, thick fingers digging into the thin skin over bone. Pain flared white-hot up her arm. Another officer grabbed her other shoulder and pulled. They did not lift her. They dragged. Her sneaker caught on the industrial flooring. It twisted off her heel and skidded backward, left behind like something discarded. Inside the aircraft doorway, framed by warm cabin light and polished chrome, Bradford Halloway stood perfectly upright. His tie was immaculate, his hair unmoved, his expression composed. "Remove her," he said, as if asking for a spilled drink to be cleaned. Vivienne's glasses fell. They hit the metal floor and slid across the threshold, skittering to a stop near a pair of Italian loafers. Harrison Cole glanced down. He laughed, a short, amused exhale. The toe of his shoe came down. Crunch. The frame snapped beneath polished leather. Rain hammered against the reinforced glass panels of Terminal 3, smearing the runway lights into bleeding streaks of blue and orange. The jet engines hummed low and steady. Indifferent, Vivian's cheek struck the railing. For a moment the world fractured into blur and metallic taste. Blood gathered at her lip. She inhaled jet fuel and damp air and humiliation. Passengers inside the cabin had risen halfway from their seats. Phones were up now, screens glowing, small red recording dots blinking like a constellation of witnesses. "She's an old woman," someone shouted from row 2. "Sit down, or you're next." The officers dragged her farther down the jet bridge. Her socked foot slipped against cold metal. Her wrist twisted under the torque of their grip. "You're hurting me," she said. It came out hoarse. Should have complied. The aircraft door loomed behind them. Warm light, leather, champagne flutes half full. Bradford stepped to the threshold. He smoothed an invisible crease from his sleeve. "Have a nice flight, honey." The door swung inward. Heavy steel met steel. Thud. The locking mechanism engaged with a final mechanical click that echoed down the hollow tunnel. The engines began to spool higher, a rising mechanical growl that swallowed the remaining sounds. Vivian lay on her side, breath shallow, cheek pressed against wet metal. The vibration of the aircraft traveled through the jet bridge floor and into her bones. Alone. Not entirely. Her phone was still in her hand. The screen was cracked in a spider web of fractures, but it glowed stubbornly through them. A faint vibration hummed against her palm. Officer Kowski looked down at her. "You can get up now. We're taking you to holding." He sounded irritated, as if she had made him late for dinner. She did not move immediately. Rainwater crept under her sleeve. The cold seeped inward. Her wrist throbbed in pulses that matched the engine's rhythm. Behind the sealed door, first class prepared for departure. Lavender towels, soft lighting, a senator's son settling into extra legroom. Vivian blinked hard, clearing blood from her lashes. Her vision swam without her glasses. The world was edges and shadow. The officers each grabbed an arm again, hauling her upright. Her sock left a faint smear of red on the ridged floor. "Interfering with a flight crew," Kowski muttered. "Resisting arrest." The words felt rehearsed. The jet engines roared. Through the narrow jet bridge window, she saw the aircraft begin to move. the massive body rolling backward, indifferent, expensive. The plane was leaving. They dragged her toward the stairwell leading down to the service corridor. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting sickly halos across concrete walls stained by years of industrial cleaner. Passengers inside the plane were no longer visible, only reflection. Vivian's reflection in the glass looked small, hoodie torn, hair loosened from its bun, blood tracing a thin line down her cheek. The kind of woman no one believed, the kind of woman easy to move. "Stand straight," Kowski barked. Her knees buckled slightly. The officers adjusted their grip to compensate, more shove than support. At the bottom of the jet bridge, the roar of the departing aircraft intensified. The plane taxied toward the runway, engines winding higher, preparing to lift thousands of pounds of metal and arrogance into the sky. Vivian closed her eyes for one steadying breath. The vibration faded. The aircraft turned. Then it accelerated. The thunder rolled through the tarmac, and it left. The sound diminished into distance, swallowed by rain and night and airspace. Silence followed, not quiet. A hollow, ringing silence. Kowski tightened his hold again. "Move." She opened her eyes. Her phone vibrated once more in her hand. The cracked screen still lit. She looked down at it, then up at the officers, then back at the closed aircraft door far above, now just another sealed surface in a system that had decided she was disposable. The plane climbed into the clouds, and the woman they dragged across the jet bridge watched it go, blood drying on her face, phone still glowing in her palm. The rain thinned to a mist by the time they pushed her through the service corridor. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The air smelled of disinfectant and damp concrete. Somewhere far above, a jet engine roared again, distant now, already committed to the Atlantic. Vivian's wrist throbbed with each heartbeat. The swelling had begun, tight beneath the skin. Officer Kowski's grip loosened just enough for her to steady herself against the cinder block wall. "Phone away," he said. She didn't answer. The cracked screen in her palm glowed through spiderweb fractures. A thin line of blood had dried across the glass. She wiped it with the edge of her torn sleeve, leaving a faint smear. Her thumb moved with deliberate calm. She opened a secure contact list. The icons were plain, unremarkable, government gray. No names that meant anything to men like Kowski. She pressed one. The line rang once. Twice. Kowski leaned closer. "Ma'am?" "Put it down." It clicked open. "Vivian!" The voice on the other end was low, alert, already aware something was off. "I thought you were airborne." She held the phone steady despite the tremor in her wrist. "Robert," she said. Her voice was quiet, even. "Kill it." A pause. "Kill what?" "The transfer. The Sky Horizon Revitalization Grant." She swallowed, tasting iron. "Freeze the 4 billion immediately." The corridor seemed to contract around her. The fluorescent buzz sharpened. "Vivian, the press release goes out in 20 minutes. The President, Article 5. She cut in. Oversight Charter. Gross negligence and operational non-compliance. Kowski shifted his weight. "Who are you talking to?" She ignored him. "I was forcibly removed from the aircraft by Sky Horizon staff and airport security." She continued. "Physical assault. Classified documents were transported without the authorized federal custodian. That qualifies." The words were precise, surgical. On the other end, silence deepened. "Are you safe?" Robert asked. "No," she said. "But that's not the relevant question." Her wrist pulsed violently. She leaned her shoulder against the wall to keep her balance. "The relevant question," she said, "is whether taxpayer money is about to be wired to an airline that just demonstrated contempt for federal authority and passenger safety. Another silence. Kowski reached toward the phone. "Ma'am, this is your final warning." She turned her head slowly and looked at him. Her eyes were clear now, focused. "Robert," she said, never breaking eye contact with the officer. "Freeze it. Freeze it." On the other end of the line, a keyboard began to clatter. Rapid. Controlled. "I'm invoking the emergency suspension protocol," Robert said. "This will trigger an immediate compliance review and halt the disbursement." "Good. You understand the fallout." "Yes." Her breath fogged faintly in the cool corridor air. She did not blink. "Press will ask questions," Robert continued. "Markets will react. They should." The officers exchanged a glance. Kowski frowned, uncertain. "Vivian," Robert said carefully, "who authorized your removal?" "Everyone," she replied. "Captain, Chief Purser, Airport Police." A beat. "I'll notify DHS and the Secretary," he said. "Stay where you are." "I'm not going anywhere," she answered. The call ended. The corridor felt different now. Kowski let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Treasury, huh?" She slid the phone into her pocket with slow, deliberate control. "You just cost yourself more trouble," he said. "Interfering with a flight crew is federal." She pushed away from the wall despite the flare of pain in her wrist. "Officer," she said softly, "that plane you just helped clear?" He stared at her. "It doesn't have funding anymore," he scoffed. "Funding for what?" "For survival." They escorted her down another hallway toward holding. The air grew colder. The scent of industrial cleaner intensified. Behind layers of concrete and glass and bureaucracy, digital systems were already moving. In Washington, a compliance alert flashed red on a secure terminal. In Dallas, an internal Treasury portal displayed a status change. Pending, suspended. At a trading desk in New York, a pre-market indicator flickered downward. Vivian felt none of it physically. What she felt was the steady, deliberate shift of weight. A system recalibrating. Kowski opened the holding room door. Metal scraped against tile. "Have a seat." She stepped inside. The bench was stainless steel, bolted to the wall. The air was stale, tinged with sweat and ammonia. He removed her satchel and set it on the desk outside the bars. He didn't open it. Not yet. She lowered herself carefully onto the bench, cradling her wrist. The phone vibrated once more in her pocket. A single text. "Funds suspended. Review initiated." She closed her eyes for half a second. Across the Atlantic, at 35,000 feet, champagne glasses clinked softly in first class. On the ground, in a corridor that smelled like bleach and rain, a $4 billion wire transfer had just stopped mid-flight. Kowski returned to his desk outside the cell and began typing slowly with 2 fingers. "Name?" he called out. She opened her eyes. "Dr. Vivian Toussaint," she said. He paused, mid-keystroke. "Spell it." She did. He typed. The fluorescent light flickered overhead again, buzzing like an insect caught in glass. In Zurich, a flight plan updated silently. In Dallas, a CEO's phone began to ring. Vivian rested her head lightly against the cool concrete behind her. The plane was in the air, but the money was not. Several hours earlier, the cabin had smelled like lavender and leather. Seat 1A sat beneath a soft halo of recessed lighting, wide and immaculate, the stitching on the cream upholstery perfectly aligned. A glass of sparkling water rested untouched on the console. Vivian Toussaint sat with her eyes closed, her breathing shallow but steady. The charcoal hoodie draped loosely over her shoulders. Her satchel was clutched against her ribs, knuckles pale from fatigue rather than fear. Across the aisle, A man in seat 1B typed rapidly on a silver laptop, the glow of spreadsheets reflecting off his glasses. Footsteps approached, polished shoes on carpet. "Excuse me, ma'am." The voice carried sweetness that didn't reach the eyes. Vivian opened one eye. Bradford Halloway stood over her, tablet tucked beneath his arm. His tie was symmetrical to the millimeter. His smile was a blade wrapped in silk. "Yes?" she asked. "May I see your boarding pass again?" She exhaled softly. "You scanned it at the gate." "I understand," he said, tapping the tablet against his thigh. "We have a small discrepancy." She reached into her pocket and handed him the slightly crumpled paper. The thermal ink had begun to fade at the edges. Bradford glanced at it, then at his tablet, then back at her. A pause. "Theatrical. Seat 1A, he said lightly. "What is?" "Well," his voice dropped half an octave, though loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "This cabin is generally reserved for our full-fare premium partners or global elite members. This ticket shows an upgrade through miles. I purchased it full fare 3 weeks ago," she replied. "Corporate portal." He gave a short, dismissive chuckle. "Corporate portal," he repeated. "Right." He kept the boarding pass. "I'll hold on to this for a moment," he added. "We may need to reseat you. Weight and balance." Her eyes sharpened. "This is a wide-body aircraft," she said evenly. "Moving one woman will not alter gravity." His smile thinned. "It's operational necessity." He turned away without returning the pass. Vivian watched him walk toward the galley. Her fingers tightened around the satchel strap. She had seen this posture before. In hearing rooms, in negotiation chambers. The small lift of a chin when someone believed they were correcting an inconvenience. She glanced down at her hoodie. "Ah, he thinks I am an inconvenience." The commotion began seconds later. A younger man swept into the cabin, flanked by 2 assistants. His suit was cut perfectly, his jaw sharper than the overhead lighting. "Brad," the man said loudly, not bothering to lower his voice. "Seriously?" My father said. 1A. I need the bulkhead." Bradford's posture shifted instantly. "Mr. Cole," he said, stepping forward. "Of course. We're sorting a manifest issue." Harrison Cole tossed his coat at a junior attendant without looking at her. "My knees still messed up from Aspen," he added. "I'm not folding myself into some middle seat." Vivian recognized him immediately. Tabloid headlines, nightclub photos, the senator's son who believed consequences were theoretical. Bradford leaned closer to Harrison. "Just a minor error. We'll clear it." He turned and marched back down the aisle. The cabin air felt different now. Thinner. "Miss Tucson," he said, no longer smiling. "There's been a system error. Duplicate booking. We're moving you to Economy Plus, row 24. "I'm not moving," she replied. Her voice did not rise. It did not tremble. It simply existed. His eyes flicked briefly to Harrison, who was watching with impatience. "Ma'am," Bradford said, dropping the sweetness, "this seat belongs to Mr. Cole. He is a Global Services Platinum member." "And I am a paying passenger," she answered. "The system does not show a frequent flyer number for you." "I don't collect points," she said. "I conduct business." The man in seat 1B stopped typing. The silence expanded. Bradford leaned closer, invading the invisible boundary between them. "We're closing the doors in 3 minutes," he said under his breath. "You can walk back, or you can be escorted off. And if you're escorted off, you're not going to Zurich." Her gaze drifted past him to Harrison, who tapped his watch theatrically. "Make the call," she said softly. Bradford straightened. "Captain," he said into his earpiece, "we have a disturbance in first, The word hung in the air like a stain. Moments later, Captain Jeffrey Pine emerged from the cockpit. Silver hair, broad shoulders, authority worn like a second uniform. "What's the issue?" Pine asked. "She's refusing crew instructions," Bradford said smoothly. "Duplicate booking." Vivian looked at the captain. "I have a valid ticket," she said. "And you're giving my seat to a donor's son." Pine's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, on this aircraft, crew instructions are federal law. Then you should check the manifest code next to my name," she said calmly, "before you proceed." He didn't. "I don't have time for this," he replied. "Grab your belongings." "No." The word landed heavier than it sounded. A faint ripple moved through the cabin. Someone lifted a phone. Bradford's patience snapped. "Law enforcement at the gate," he said sharply into his headset. Harrison exhaled in annoyance and reached for a mimosa. The cabin door remained open. Outside, rain streaked down the jet bridge glass. Inside, lavender towels cooled untouched on silver trays. Vivian remained seated in 1A, hands folded lightly in her lap, eyes steady. The plane had not yet pushed back, but the decision had already been made. Captain Pine did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The cabin lights reflected off the silver in his hair as he stepped fully into the aisle. The faint scent of jet fuel drifted in from the open door behind him, mixing uneasily with warmed bread and citrus. "Ma'am," he said, fixing his gaze on Vivian, "when a flight attendant gives you an instruction, that instruction carries federal authority." The words were rehearsed, polished, heavy, with implied consequence. Vivian looked up at him from seat 1A. "I am aware of federal authority, Captain," she replied evenly, "which is why I'm asking you to verify the manifest code next to my name." A flicker of irritation crossed his face. "This is not a courtroom," he said. "We have a departure slot to meet." Harrison shifted in the aisle behind Bradford, checking his reflection in the darkened cabin window. "Can we move this along?" he muttered. "I have a call scheduled." Bradford folded his arms. "She's obstructing boarding," he said smoothly, refusing reassignment. Vivian's hands remained folded in her lap. Her satchel rested against her hip. "I purchased this seat," she said. "Full fare. And we are reaccommodating you." Bradford snapped. The words sounded sterile, sanitized. Captain Pine exhaled sharply. "Ma'am, if you do not comply, I will have to consider this interference with a flight crew." The cabin went still. The man in 1B slowly closed his laptop. Vivian tilted her head slightly. "Interference implies disruption," she said. "I have not raised my voice." Bradford stepped forward again, impatience creeping into his movements. "You're delaying an international departure," he said. "That qualifies." A chime sounded from the galley. The boarding door warning. 3 minutes. The air thickened. Captain Pine reached for his shoulder mic. "Ground control, this is Pine. We require airport law enforcement at the gate." A faint crackle answered. Harrison gave a satisfied nod and stepped aside, clearing space in the aisle. Vivian watched the captain closely. "You're making a mistake," she said quietly. "I don't have time to debate," he replied. Footsteps approached from the jet bridge. The metallic clink of utility belts carried into the cabin before the officers appeared. 2 uniformed airport police stepped across the threshold. Dark rain beaded on their shoulders. One of them scanned the cabin quickly, eyes landing on Vivian. "That her?" he asked. "Row." Bradford gestured with an open palm, refusing to comply. The lead officer moved down the aisle. "Ma'am," he said, "let's make this easy." Vivian met his gaze. "I have a legal right to this seat." "Not if the captain says otherwise." She inhaled slowly. "Captain Pine," she said, without looking away from the officer. Last opportunity. Check the manifest code. Pine did not respond. Harrison leaned against the bulkhead, sipping his drink. The officer reached down. Stand up. No. The refusal was soft, but absolute. A pause. Then the officer's grip closed around her forearm. The contact was sudden, rough. Her chair jolted backward as he pulled. Stop resisting, the second officer barked, already reaching for her other arm. I'm not resisting, she said, trying to steady her balance. Bradford stepped backward to avoid contact, face tight with controlled annoyance. The first officer pulled harder. Her shoulder twisted at an unnatural angle. Pain flared down her spine. Up, he ordered. The cabin's warmth seemed to drain away. Several passengers had their phones raised now. Small red recording lights blinked between seatbacks. Hey! Someone said sharply from the second row. She's not fighting you. Sit down, Bradford snapped, pointing. The officer's grip tightened. Vivian's glasses slipped from her face. They hit the carpeted aisle with a muted tap before sliding toward the galley. The second officer grabbed her other arm and hauled her upright with force. Her knees struck the seat frame. Air left her lungs in a sharp gasp. Escort her off, Captain Pine said firmly, already turning his back toward the cockpit. The decision was final. The officers began dragging her toward the door. Her sneaker caught briefly in the carpet and twisted free. The aisle seemed impossibly narrow now. Faces blurred. Phones held high. Harrison watched with open impatience. You should have just moved, he muttered. The officers did not slow at the threshold. Cold air rushed in from the jet bridge, slicing through the warm cabin. Careful, someone whispered. The first officer misjudged the step. His grip slipped. Vivian stumbled forward onto the ridged metal surface of the jet bridge. Her knee struck first, then her shoulder. A dull crack echoed as her wrist bent under her weight. Pain shot upward, blinding. Behind her, Bradford remained framed in the doorway, composed, untouched. Close it, he said to the gate agent. The heavy aircraft door began to swing inward. Vivian lifted her head just enough to see the interior light, narrowing to a thin strip. For a fraction of a second, her eyes met Captain Pine's as he disappeared back toward the cockpit. He did not look back. The door sealed with a heavy mechanical thud. Inside, the cabin lights glowed softly once more. Outside, rain streaked down the glass. The officers pulled her to her feet again. You're being charged with interfering with a flight crew, the lead officer said. The engines deepened in pitch, preparing to push back. Vivian steadied herself against the railing, vision blurred without her glasses. Her wrist throbbed violently now. You've just made this very expensive, she said, quietly. The officer gave a short laugh. Yeah? For who? Behind the sealed door, the aircraft began to move. The decision had been executed, and the consequences were already in motion. The holding room was colder than the jet bridge, not by temperature, by design. The walls were painted a color that tried to pass for neutral and failed. Fluorescent light pooled overhead in a dull, humming haze. The stainless steel bench bolted to the wall, leached warmth from anything that touched it. Vivian sat on the edge of it, spine straight despite the pain radiating through her left arm. Her wrist had swollen grotesquely, the skin stretched tight and shiny, purple blooming beneath the surface. Every pulse sent a dull hammer strike through bone. Officer Kowski sat at a metal desk just outside the bars, typing slowly with two thick fingers. Tap, tap, pause, backspace. The sound was almost meditative. Name, he said, without looking up. She stared at the opposite wall. A faint scratch ran across the paint at eye level. Someone had carved something there once. It had been painted over badly. I already provided identification, she said quietly. He snorted. Yeah, The little badge in your bag. He jerked his chin toward her satchel, resting unopened on a counter. Department of the Treasury. His tone implied costume jewelry. Looked fake to me. She turned her head slowly. It's not, she said. Kowski leaned back in his chair. The fluorescent light reflected off the metal buttons of his uniform. You'd be surprised how many people flash fake federal IDs at airports, he said. Her fingers curled carefully against her thigh to keep them from trembling. I don't need to feel important, she replied. He gave a short laugh. Ooh, scary. He returned to typing. Full legal name, he repeated. Dr. Bucks. Vivienne Toussaint. He paused, mid-keystroke. Doctor, huh? Yes. Medical? No. Then what? Auditing. He blinked once. That's not a real thing. It is, she said. He resumed typing. Interfering with flight crew. Failure to comply. Resisting arrest. The words appeared on his monitor, reflected faintly in the glass separating them. I did not resist, she said. He shrugged. You didn't stand up when told. That is not resistance. Tell it to the judge. The air smelled faintly of industrial cleaner and stale sweat. Somewhere down the corridor, a door slammed. A distant radio crackled with static. Her wrist throbbed harder now. The swelling pressed against the cuff of her sleeve. Kowski glanced up at her again. You should have just moved, he said casually. First class ain't worth this. She met his eyes. It wasn't about the seat. He rolled his eyes. It's always about the seat. Her phone vibrated softly in her pocket. He noticed. Hand it over. It's evidence, she said. He stood, chair scraping loudly across tile. Ma'am, you don't get to decide what's evidence. He reached for the cell door keys. Before he could unlock it, the heavy steel door at the end of the corridor burst open with a violent bang. The sound ricocheted off the concrete. Kowski flinched. Footsteps fast, purposeful, echoed down the hallway. A woman in a trench coat moved with controlled urgency, hair damp, eyes sharp. Two men in dark suits followed several steps behind, their movements precise and quiet. Authorized personnel only. Kowski snapped reflexively. The woman did not slow. Open the door, she said. Her voice was not loud. It did not need to be. Kowski frowned. She's being processed. Open it. The air shifted. Something in her tone cut through his bravado. Who are you? He demanded. She stepped directly in front of him and held up a credential wallet for exactly 1 second. The seal caught the fluorescent light. Department of Homeland Security. Special Agent Elena Rostova. Kowski's posture altered almost imperceptibly. Agent, open the door, she repeated. Sharper now. He fumbled with the keys. Metal clinked against metal before he found the right one. The lock disengaged with a dull click. Rostova stepped inside the cell immediately. Her gaze dropped to Vivian's wrist, then to the dried blood at her temple, then to the torn fabric at her shoulder. Her expression hardened. Dr. Toussaint, she said quietly. Vivian looked up at her. Yes. Did they call medical? No. Rostova turned slowly toward Kowski. What did you charge her with? Interference, he said defensively. Resisting. She did not resist. Rostova replied flatly. Kowski shifted his weight. She refused to comply with crew. She is the Auditor General for the Federal Oversight Committee. Rostova cut in. The words hung in the air like a dropped weight. Kowski blinked. I don't. She holds level 5 clearance. Rostova continued. Silence swallowed the corridor. Kowski looked at Vivian again. Really looked. The hoodie, the messy bun, the blood, the swollen wrist. You're telling me? He began. Yes, Rostova said, his face drained of color. Vivian rose carefully from the bench. The motion made her vision swim briefly, but she steadied herself without assistance. Rostova instinctively reached out. Vivian waved her off gently. "I need my phone," Vivian said. Rostova nodded toward one of the suited men. He retrieved it from Kowski without asking permission and handed it to her. "Officer Kowski," Rostova said, voice cool now, almost clinical. "You are relieved of duty, effective immediately. Surrender your weapon and badge." The words struck harder than a shout. "What?" he whispered. "You used excessive force on a federal official," she said, "and you failed to verify credentials." "I was following protocol." "Your protocol," she replied, "is under review." He removed his badge slowly. The metal clinked against the desk. Vivian adjusted her grip on her phone. Her wrist trembled. "Get me a secure room," she said calmly, "and contact the White House press office." Rostova nodded once. Outside, far beyond the concrete walls of the holding area, systems were continuing to move. The plane was already in the air, but the balance had shifted, and for the first time since the aircraft door closed, the room felt smaller for someone else. They moved her out of holding without ceremony. The corridor lights felt harsher now, every fluorescent tube buzzing like exposed wiring. Two suited agents walked a half-step behind her, not touching, not speaking. Agent Rostova stayed close to her right side, eyes scanning ahead. Airport staff flattened themselves against the walls as they passed. Vivian's wrist throbbed with a steady, punishing rhythm. The swelling had darkened. Each step sent a shock through her forearm, but her stride remained controlled. They entered the airport director's office through a side door. The room smelled faintly of stale coffee and printer toner. A wall of monitors displayed live feeds of terminals and runways. Rain streaked across every camera lens. "Secure line," Rostova said to a man in a rumpled suit behind the desk. He swallowed and immediately reached for a corded phone on a separate console. He unplugged one line and connected another. The click of the port locking into place sounded oddly final. "It's clean," he said. Vivian lowered herself into a leather chair. The softness felt foreign after steel. An EMT knelt beside her, gently cutting away the sleeve at her wrist. The scissors made a quiet slicing sound through fabric. "That's going to need imaging," he murmured. "Later," she said. Her phone buzzed again. Notifications cascaded down the cracked screen. Missed calls. Unknown numbers. Media inquiries. She silenced them with one precise motion. "Dr. Toussaint," the airport director began, voice thin. "On behalf of—" She lifted her hand slightly. "Not now." He stopped. Rostova handed her the secure handset. Vivian dialed without hesitation. The line connected almost instantly. "Press office," a brisk voice answered. "This is Dr. Vivian Toussaint," she said. "I need an immediate statement drafted regarding the suspension of Sky Horizon Airways' federal revitalization grant." A pause. "Yes, doctor. Language will include gross negligence, operational non-compliance, and pending investigation into passenger removal procedures." Her tone was even. "Clinical. Do you wish to reference the assault?" "Yes." The EMT wrapped her wrist in a temporary brace. The Velcro rasped as it tightened. "Statement will confirm I was forcibly removed from the aircraft while in possession of classified materials." The airport director shifted in his seat. "That will trigger." "Exactly," she said. The press aide on the other end spoke quickly. "Release window? Immediate." She ended the call. Rostova studied her. "DHS has already flagged the incident," the agent said quietly. Vivian's eyes lifted. "Video?" "A passenger recorded everything." Rostova turned one of the monitors toward her. A shaky vertical clip filled the screen. The audio was distorted by cabin noise, but the words were clear enough. System error. Global Services Platinum. Make the call. Then the dragging, the crunch of breaking glasses, the door slamming. The EMT looked away. The airport director muttered something under his breath. Vivian watched the footage without expression. "How many views?" she asked. "Climbing," Rostova replied. Rapidly. As if summoned by the word, one of the other monitors shifted automatically to a news feed. Breaking news flashed in bold red across the lower third. Treasury freezes Sky Horizon funding. The anchor's voice cut through the office speakers. Following a reported incident involving a senior federal oversight official, the Department of the Treasury has suspended the $4 billion revitalization grant previously allocated to Sky Horizon Airways. Markets are reacting sharply. The screen split to show a pre-market trading graph plunging downward. Red, sharp, unforgiving. The airport director exhaled shakily. "Oh my God." Vivian's gaze did not waver. "Contact Swiss aviation authorities," she said to Rostova. "They're already in communication. Inform them the crew of Flight 9002 will require detainment upon landing." The airport director blinked. "Detainment?" "Yes." Her voice did not rise. "They facilitated the unlawful transport of classified federal materials without authorized custody." Rostova's jaw tightened in understanding. "That gives jurisdiction," the agent said quietly. "It does." The office phone on the desk began ringing, and ringing, and ringing. No one answered it. On the monitor, another headline appeared. "Sky Horizon. Stock plummets." A financial analyst spoke urgently, words tumbling over one another about halted trading and liquidity risk. Vivian leaned back in the chair carefully, mindful of her wrist. "Have legal prepare a briefing," she said, "and notify Senator Alvarez's office." Rostova nodded. The EMT finished securing the brace. "You should go to a hospital," he said gently. "I will." Her phone vibrated once more. A new message. "Funds officially frozen. Compliance review initiated." She allowed herself one slow breath. In Dallas, phones were undoubtedly exploding. In Zurich, air traffic control would soon receive instructions. At 35,000 feet, champagne still flowed, unaware. Vivian rose from the chair. The room felt smaller now, not because of walls, but because of consequences expanding outward. "Conference room," she said. The airport director stood immediately and led the way. Behind them, the monitor replayed the video again. The moment of impact. The moment of arrogance. The moment the system miscalculated. And outside, through rain-streaked glass, another aircraft lifted off the runway, engines roaring into gray sky. This one, however, carried no federal money with it. At 35,000 feet, the cabin lights were dimmed to an artificial dusk. Harrison Cole reclined in seat 1A, shoes off, silk eye mask pushed halfway up his forehead. A half-empty glass of cognac rested in the console cradle beside him. The hum of the engines blended with the soft clink of china from the galley. Bradford Halloway stood near the espresso machine, recounting the earlier disturbance to a junior attendant in a low, amused tone. "She refused to move," he said, shaking his head. "You give them an inch." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The aircraft was sealed in its own insulated world, disconnected from headlines and consequences. No cellular signal reached this altitude. No notifications pierced the pressurized calm. Outside the cabin windows, the Atlantic stretched in endless black. On the ground, that calm had detonated. The video spread with algorithmic efficiency. Within minutes of posting, it was clipped, reposted, stitched. Captions mutated in real time. Sky Horizon beats up grandma for senator's son. The billion-dollar drag. Boycott Sky Horizon. On one monitor inside the airport conference room, view counts ticked upward in frantic increments. 50,000, 200,000, 1 million. News vans began arriving at O'Hare, across the country. In a glass-walled executive suite in Dallas, the situation was unraveling in full color. CEO Richard Sterling stood at the center of a room lined with screens. Each monitor displayed a different crisis. Financial channels in red, social media feeds in chaos, the viral clip replaying again and again. Sterling's jaw was clenched so tightly the muscle twitched. "Tell me that's not who I think it is," he said, to no one in particular. His head of public relations, Sarah, held a tablet with trembling hands. "It's confirmed," she said quietly. Dr. Vivian Toussaint. The name seemed to suck the oxygen from the room. Sterling's posture faltered. "The auditor?" he whispered. "Yes." Silence fell except for the ringing of phones. 3 desk phones, 2 mobile devices, 1 internal line blinking insistently. Sterling pressed both palms against the conference table. "She was in economy," he said. "No," Sarah replied. "She was in first class. Full fare." Another screen shifted to a breaking banner. "Treasury freezes Sky Horizon funding." The analyst beneath it spoke in urgent cadence about liquidity, credit exposure, bankruptcy risk. Sterling stared as the stock ticker at the bottom of the screen plunged downward. Red arrows, negative percentages. Trading halted. A phone on the wall-mounted console began to ring with a distinct triple tone reserved for direct government inquiries. No one reached for it. "Get Senator Cole on the line," Sterling demanded hoarsely. "We tried," Sarah said. His office issued a statement. She read from the tablet. "Senator Raymond Cole is appalled by the treatment of a passenger on Sky Horizon Flight 9002. He had no prior knowledge of any seating dispute and supports a full investigation." Sterling's head snapped up. "He requested the seat." "There's no written record," Sarah said. It was verbal. Sterling looked at the video feed again. Bradford's face filled the frame as he stood in the doorway, expression composed, almost smug. The caption beneath the clip read, "The face of corporate arrogance." Sterling's phone buzzed in his hand. A message from legal. "Liquidity position critical." He closed his eyes briefly. "How long until landing?" he asked. 4 hours, Sarah answered. He turned to the operations chief in the corner. "Pull the manifest for that flight." The man hesitated. "It's already public," he said quietly. Passenger list leaked online. Sterling's face drained. On another monitor, a live shot from outside O'Hare showed reporters gathering behind barricades. Microphones raised. Rain slicking their jackets. Back in Chicago, inside the conference room, Vivian stood near a window overlooking the tarmac. She could see aircraft lights blinking through sheets of rain. Agent Rostova approached her with a tablet. "Markets have halted trading," the agent said. "European regulators are in contact." Vivian nodded once. "Good." Her phone vibrated again. An incoming call from a number she recognized. She declined it. Outside the building, protesters were already forming. Cardboard signs lifted above umbrellas. "Passengers not cargo. Accountability now." The video replayed on a loop inside newsrooms across the country. The crunch of broken glasses had become an audio signature. In Dallas, the final blow arrived without warning. The main screen in the executive suite shifted to a government seal. A formal statement scrolled across it. "Pursuant to Article 5 of the Federal Oversight Charter, the Department of the Treasury hereby suspends disbursement of the Sky Horizon Revitalization Grant, pending investigation into gross negligence and operational non-compliance." Sterling lowered himself slowly into a chair. The leather creaked beneath him. Chapter 11. Legal counsel said softly from across the room. Sterling did not respond. Far above the Atlantic, the seatbelt sign chimed softly as the aircraft adjusted altitude. In the first-class cabin, Harrison shifted in his sleep. Bradford checked his reflection in the galley mirror and adjusted his tie one more time. He had no idea that, thousands of miles below, the financial foundation beneath his employer had already collapsed. The engines continued their steady hum. The ground, however, had moved. The conference room overlooked a rain-soaked runway. Water streaked down the tall glass panels, distorting the blinking lights of taxiing aircraft into wavering halos. Inside, the air smelled faintly of copier toner and strong coffee. Vivian sat at the head of a polished wooden table, her injured wrist secured in a rigid brace. A small digital recorder rested near her good hand. Its red light blinked steadily. Across from her sat three men in dark suits. One wore the Sky Horizon logo on a silver lapel pin. His tie was slightly crooked, as if tightened in a hurry. Dr. Toussaint, the airline representative began, voice strained but controlled. We deeply regret the misunderstanding that occurred earlier today. She watched him without expression. Misunderstanding, she repeated. Yes. An unfortunate seating conflict that escalated unnecessarily. The word escalated hung in the air like a misfired flare. The representative slid a thin folder across the table. The paper made a soft whispering sound against polished wood. We are prepared to offer an immediate settlement, he said. $5 million for damages, along with a formal apology and a joint public statement clarifying the situation. The digital recorder blinked. Vivian did not touch the folder. Clarifying what? She asked. That no malicious intent was involved. Her gaze shifted briefly to the airport director seated near the door. He looked down at his hands. No malicious intent, she repeated quietly. You physically removed a federally cleared official from an aircraft. The representative swallowed. 10 million, he said quickly. And lifetime first-class travel privileges. Silence. The rain intensified outside, drumming softly against the glass. You think this is about comfort, Vivian said. The representative opened his mouth, then closed it again. This is about compliance, she continued. Your crew transported classified federal documents without the authorized custodian present. The man stiffened. That is not accurate. She tapped the table once with her index finger. Your captain closed the aircraft door. Your crew departed the gate. My satchel remained on board. The digital recorder captured every syllable. Those materials are subject to federal handling protocols. Chain of custody requires direct supervision. She turned slightly toward Agent Rostova, who stood near the wall. Timestamp? Vivian asked. Rostova glanced at her tablet. Door closed at 1834 local. Pushback at 1837. Vivian nodded. Record that. The representative's face had gone pale. We were unaware. Exactly, she said. The word cut cleanly. Unaware is not a defense under federal statute. The room felt smaller now. One of the suited men shifted in his chair. Doctor. Surely, we can resolve this privately. Vivian leaned back slightly, careful of her wrist. You are already not private, she said. Agent Rostova turned one of the wall-mounted monitors toward the table. A live news broadcast filled the screen. The headline crawled across the bottom, in bold letters. Treasury suspension sends Sky Horizon toward insolvency. A market analyst spoke rapidly about frozen credit lines and cascading investor withdrawal. The airline representative stared at the screen. This will destroy us, he whispered. Vivian's eyes did not soften. Your corporate culture destroyed you. She reached for a slim leather folio on the table and opened it with deliberate care. Inside were printed excerpts of the Oversight Charter. She slid one page forward. Article 5, she said. Gross negligence and operational non-compliance. Her finger traced a single paragraph. Immediate suspension of disbursement upon credible evidence of misconduct. The representative's voice cracked. Reinstatement is possible. After full investigation, she replied, and complete restructuring of your passenger removal protocols. She leaned forward slightly. I want an internal audit of every VIP upgrade granted in the past 12 months. The man blinked. I want disclosure of all communications between your executive office and any elected official concerning seating accommodations. He inhaled sharply. And I want the crew of Flight 9002 detained upon arrival in Zurich for questioning. The room froze. Detained? He echoed. Yes. Agent Rostova spoke calmly from behind him. Swiss authorities have been notified. The representative's composure fractured. You can't possibly mean. I do, Vivian said. Her phone vibrated lightly against the table. A secure message preview appeared on the cracked screen. Zurich Control confirms remote stand isolation. Local law enforcement on site. She allowed herself one measured breath. The aircraft will not dock at a passenger gate, she said evenly. It will be met on the tarmac. Outside, lightning flickered faintly behind heavy clouds. The representative stared at her as if seeing her clearly for the first time. You're ending a company, he said. No, she replied. I'm enforcing a contract. The digital recorder continued its steady blink. Agent Rostova stepped forward and placed a printed email on the table. Official notification of suspension, she said. The representative read it in silence. Somewhere down the hall, reporters were shouting questions that could not yet reach this room. Vivian closed her folio. You offered 10 million, she said. Yes. I want structural reform, she answered. She stood carefully, adjusting the brace on her wrist. The pain remained constant. Grounding. Prepare for bankruptcy proceedings, she said calmly. And tell your captain to expect company. Beyond the glass, another aircraft began its descent through the rain. In the sky over Europe, one was descending as well, but it would not arrive where its passengers expected. Dawn spilled gold across the jagged edge of the Swiss Alps. Inside the cockpit, the light felt colder. Captain Jeffrey Pine stared at the approach display as Zurich Control's voice crackled through the radio. Sky Horizon 9002. You are instructed to proceed to remote stand Zulu 9. Do not approach terminal gates. Acknowledge. Pine frowned. Zulu 9, we have scheduled gate E43. Negative. Proceed to isolation pad. Shut down engines upon arrival. Await further instruction. The word isolation hung in the air. The first officer glanced sideways. That's for security events. Pine's jaw tightened. He adjusted their heading without argument. The aircraft banked gently away from the gleaming glass terminals and toward a stretch of concrete far from the main concourse. Beyond it stood high perimeter fencing and a row of flashing blue lights. In the cabin, the seatbelt sign chimed. Bradford straightened from the galley counter, smoothing his tie. The early morning light poured through the windows, catching the polished metal of coffee pots and the rim of crystal glasses. Preparing for arrival, he announced softly. Harrison Cole stretched in seat 1A, pulling off his eye mask. All ready? Good. I've got a car waiting. He glanced out the window. The view made him frown. Why are we parking out there? He asked. That's cargo. The aircraft touched down harder than usual. The reverse thrust roared, then faded. Instead of turning toward the terminal, the plane veered sharply across the tarmac toward a cordoned section surrounded by vehicles. 6 dark vans, 4 marked police cruisers, 2 black sedans bearing small diplomatic flags. Bradford felt his phone vibrate in his pocket. He should not have turned it on yet. He did. The screen flooded instantly. 47 missed calls, urgent emails, a message from the airline's internal operations channel marked priority. His throat tightened. He opened the first notification. Effective immediately, you are suspended pending investigation. Do not make public statements. Another message followed seconds later. Corporate has issued a statement. Refer all inquiries to legal. Do not delete any communications. His fingers began to tremble. The plane rolled to a stop. The engines wound down, the familiar whine tapering into silence. Silence pressed inward from all sides. Remain seated. The captain's voice echoed through the cabin, strained but controlled. All passengers, remain seated. The forward door opened. Instead of ground crew, uniformed officers stepped aboard. Dark blue jackets, Swiss Canton police insignia, weapons slung professionally across their chests. Passengers froze. A tall man in a gray suit followed them inside, holding a clipboard. His expression was clinical. "I am Inspector Weber," he announced in precise English. "This aircraft is subject to joint investigation under cooperation between Swiss federal authorities and the United States Department of Justice." The words settled like frost. "Which one of you is Bradford Holloway?" Weber asked. Bradford's mouth opened, but no sound came out. One of the officers looked directly at him. "You," he said. Bradford swallowed. "I was performing my duties." "Step forward." His knees felt unstable as he moved into the aisle. The handcuffs appeared with quiet efficiency. Cold metal closed around his wrists. "This is absurd," he whispered. "I followed protocol. You facilitated unlawful removal of a federal official and improper transport of restricted materials," Weber said, reading from the document. "You are charged with aggravated assault and conspiracy to defraud the United States government." Bradford blinked rapidly. "I'm a flight attendant." The officer guided his arms behind his back. "Not today." Across the aisle, Harrison stood abruptly. "Excuse me," he said loudly. "There's been a mistake. I'm Harrison Cole. My father is Senator Raymond Cole." Weber turned to him without emotion. "Your passport has been revoked by the United States State Department, pending investigation." Harrison stared. "That's impossible." "It is not. But I'm in Switzerland." "Yes." The implication settled slowly across his face. "If your passport is invalid," Weber continued, "you are currently without legal entry status." 2 officers stepped closer. "You will be detained until deportation proceedings are arranged." "You can't detain me," Harrison snapped, his voice cracking at the edges. "Call the embassy." "We have," Weber replied calmly. An officer secured Harrison's wrists. The click of the cuffs echoed in the hushed cabin. Passengers watched in stunned silence. Someone in row 3 began clapping. It was tentative at first, then louder. The sound spread like a ripple across water. Bradford looked toward the cockpit desperately as he was guided down the aisle. Captain Pine stood at the doorway, pale. A flight operations message had printed minutes earlier from the cockpit console. Immediate suspension. Remain in Zurich for investigation. Pine felt his pulse hammer in his throat. He had seen the manifest code too late. Now the consequences stood in his cabin, wearing handcuffs. Bradford was escorted down the mobile staircase toward one of the waiting vans. Harrison followed, shouting something incoherent about lawyers and influence. The alpine sunrise cast long shadows across the isolation pad. The engines were silent. The aircraft, gleaming and expensive, sat alone behind a perimeter of flashing blue lights. Inside the cabin, no one spoke. The applause faded. Passengers remained seated, stunned, absorbing the reversal. A few began recording again. The door remained open, letting in the cold Swiss air. The illusion of invincibility had evaporated at altitude, and on a remote stretch of tarmac far from the terminal gates, status meant nothing. 6 months later, the air inside the Senate hearing room felt refrigerated and sharp. Cameras lined the back wall like patient predators. Their red indicator lights blinked in quiet rhythm. The polished wood of the dais reflected overhead lights in hard white streaks. Dr. Vivian Toussaint sat alone at the witness table. Her wrist had healed, though she still wore a slim silver brace beneath the cuff of her navy blazer. Her silver hair was pulled back cleanly. No hoodie, no blood, no visible damage, only composure. Dr. Toussaint, Senator Alvarez began, leaning toward her microphone. For the record, please summarize your findings regarding Sky Horizon Airways. Vivian adjusted the microphone slightly. The small click echoed through the chamber. The airline operated with systemic compliance failures, she said evenly. Federal revitalization funds were earmarked for operational stability and workforce retention. Instead, internal audits show substantial allocation toward executive compensation and stock buybacks. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Can you clarify the scope? Alvarez pressed. Approximately $4 billion were subject to disbursement under conditional oversight. Vivian replied. The conditions were violated. At the far end of the dais, Senator Raymond Cole sat rigidly in his chair. He looked diminished, thinner. His tie hung slightly loose at the collar. You triggered the suspension personally, he said, voice tight. The word dispute sounded almost hopeful. Vivian turned her head toward him. I triggered the suspension on the basis of gross negligence and unlawful conduct, she corrected. You destroyed 30,000 jobs. He shot back. Do you feel responsible for the bankruptcy? The room stilled. Vivian's expression did not change. Mathematics destroyed the airline, she said calmly. You cannot misallocate federal funds and expect stability. A flash from a camera briefly lit the chamber. Senator Cole leaned forward. You're implying criminal intent. I'm stating audit findings. He gripped the edge of the desk. You're avoiding the central question, he insisted. Was it personal? Vivian reached into the folder before her and withdrew a single sheet of paper. The soft rustle was amplified by the microphones. This is a transcript recovered from company servers, she said, time-stamped 10 minutes after departure. She slid it toward the committee clerk. The clerk read silently for a moment, then looked up. Is the old witch gone? He read aloud. Gasps moved through the gallery. Senator Cole's face drained of color. That is privileged, he began. It was recorded on corporate infrastructure. Vivian replied. It is now public record. Silence settled heavily over the room. Senator Alvarez tapped her gavel lightly, not to silence the reaction but to contain it. Dr. Toussaint, she said, please update the committee on the status of the individuals involved. Vivian folded her hands. Bradford Halloway pleaded guilty to federal assault and interference with a flight crew. He received a custodial sentence and permanent disqualification from employment in the transportation sector. And Harrison Cole? Alvarez asked. Currently awaiting trial on charges of wire fraud and bribery, Vivian answered. His passport revocation was upheld pending proceedings. A camera pivoted toward Senator Cole, who stared at the desk in front of him. And the former CEO? Alvarez continued. Assets within U.S. jurisdiction have been seized, Vivian said. They have been redirected to establish a passenger rights compensation fund. A low wave of approval moved through the audience. Former airline employees sat in the back rows, wearing small lapel pins that read, "Accountability." The hearing continued for another hour. Questions measured and precise. Each answer anchored in documentation. Each allegation supported by timestamp and audit trail. When it concluded, Senator Alvarez offered a final nod. "Thank you for your service, Doctor." Vivian gathered her papers carefully and stood. The hallway outside the chamber was chaos. Reporters pressed forward, microphones extended, camera operators stepping backward to maintain focus. "Dr. Caniff, Tucson, do you feel vindicated? Did you know who he was at the time? Are you considering a run for office?" She paused briefly near the heavy oak doors. "I didn't care who he was," she said quietly. "I cared about what was right." Flashbulbs erupted again. She stepped outside into the humid Washington afternoon. The Capitol dome gleamed under a clear sky. Traffic moved slowly along Constitution Avenue, horns faint in the distance. A black town car idled at the curb. She slid into the back seat, closing the door with a soft thud. The air conditioning hummed gently. Her phone vibrated. A message from Robert. "The compensation fund is active. First claims processed this morning." She allowed herself a small exhale. The driver glanced at her through the rearview mirror. "Where to, Doctor?" She looked out the window at the marble steps shrinking behind them. "Reagan National," she said. The driver nodded. "Which airline?" She watched a commercial jet carve a white line across the blue sky. A faint smile touched her lips. "I think I'll take the train." The car pulled into traffic, merging smoothly into the flow of the city. Behind her, the hearing room lights dimmed. Ahead, the rails stretched north in quiet parallel lines. Power, when exercised precisely, did not roar. It corrected.